Thank you very much for the opportunity, and it was wonderful hearing everything we heard this morning. Yeah, it's a pity one isn't more involved and does more, but it is a good challenge to us. I want to start telling a story. The Lord blessed me with marriage and blessed us with 2 children, healthy children. And when the Lord blessed us with a 3rd pregnancy, there was great excitement. Now, just a bit of background, I'm a twin, and my twin sister and I were expecting at the same time with all 3 our babies just a few months apart. And with our 3rd child, our pregnancies were very close, so off we went to the doctor. We went together, our husbands went there, and it was great excitement to know, is it going to be a boy or a girl? And my scan was first, and they were busy scanning, and it was taking longer and longer, and I was saying, come on, can't you see, what's the problem? And eventually my sister says, shush, something's wrong. So I looked at her, I said, no man, there's nothing wrong. What does she mean there's something wrong? And a bit later they called in another doctor, and eventually they explained to me that now it's layman's terms that I'm going to be using. That 11 weeks with the womb or the intestines are formed on the outside of the child, and at 11 weeks it goes inside, if I understand it correctly. The doctors must excuse me. And somehow some of the intestines didn't move inside the child's body. So they call it an exomphalos, which stayed out on the outside. And because of this exomphalos, it's associated with many different abnormalities. So the advice to me was that it wouldn't be wise to keep the child. For me, obviously, it was a big shock. Your mind isn't even sitting there about something that isn't healthy, and then immediately being confronted with not keeping the child. And I grew up in a Christian home. I had my dad as a pastor, and for us, life was given from God. So I went back home. I remember sitting with my dad and sobbing, and I said, Dad, doesn't matter what is wrong. I can never ever end my child's life. It's my own child. It's my baby. And if we go into the second, well, let's just first, sorry, can you go back there? The verse I have there is on the first screen. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. And in this whole journey, it's amazing how the Bible becomes alive through circumstances that we go through. And it became so alive to me, and I'll be explaining about that a bit more. So on the second screen, it's a bit small, but there it's the reports that they gave in the first and the second visit, explaining about the exomphalos, patient carefully counselled, which obviously was that it wouldn't be wise to keep the pregnancy. And then the realities that was facing, the cerebellar vermis was absent, that they determined in the beginning, and that stayed the case right through to the last scan that they did before Josh was born. And they explained to us that if we would keep the child, other than all the abnormalities that could be associated with a pregnancy, they would need to operate at birth. And because of that, they referred us to the head of pediatric surgery, the surgeon that was based in Durban. We went and saw him, and then he put us into contact with the gynae that he'd want to work with and the pediatrician. And the journey just went on from there. And in our minds, or in my mind, I felt preparing for what was coming was important. In hindsight, I don't think I would advise that, because every next test that they did and that I allowed them to do just became gloomier. And it ended up with them advising an amniotic test fluid or fluid test. And obviously it does come with risks, but thinking that the risks that we were facing were much greater, one thought maybe it would be to an advantage. However, now I think it was sending a dual message to the doctors saying that I was uncertain about keeping the child and my baby. So I'll never forget, I was in Port Elizabeth and we were rushing off to a meeting, and I got this call from the gynae, and he said to me, listen, it doesn't look good. The tests show trisomy 13, and with every test we're doing, it just looks worse. So I said to him, look, well then we stop doing the tests. And then he said to me, no. Then he said to me, no, do one more before you finally decide. And that's when I realized now I have to just make it very clear. And I said, look, it's never been an option for me to abort. This is my child. We stop tests now. We're going through with this pregnancy. And then obviously in that time, as I said, my twin sister was also expecting. She's got a very soft heart, a motherly heart, and it wasn't easy for her, expecting a healthy child. I don't have a healthy child, but I was very blessed with a lot of support all around. So we went through this walk together. She also moved from her gynae to my gynae, just so that we could be together and have each other. And then it came close to my due date, and the doctor said, look, they're going to have to do my Caesar on a Saturday, because the surgeon was going to arrive from overseas on the Friday, and he was going to need to operate. So when I was wheeled into theatre on the Saturday, they said there's been a big misunderstanding. The surgeon hasn't arrived. He's actually only arriving on the Monday. But they can't wait, so they're just going to have to stabilize the child and then do the operation later. So we went in, had the Caesar, and I've got a few photos of when he was born, just to show the exomphalos. So that's what was on the outside, and then you can see they then diagnosed that he had Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome. So that's when they've got a large tongue, they've got blotches on their faces, they're prone to certain childhood cancers, and then now they had to see what they're going to do with stabilizing the child. The pediatrician took the child through to the neonatal ICU, and they injected morphine, and they took the exomphalos, and they could just push it back into the navel. And within a few hours, now that's what the pediatrician said to me, it just started closing. And he said to me, there aren't muscles around there that can actually contract. If you look at Josh today, it looks like it was perfectly sewn up. And it was just all what the Lord did. And so he called him magic, Dr. Botha. He just said, this guy is magic, and he just fixes everything himself. Later he also called him Einstein. So as you can see, I think it was a week or two later, he started getting infection, and it was amazing how the Lord undertook every step of the way. Every step it was for me, because one honored God, he honored us in a way that we didn't deserve. And the way he undertook and being able to reckon with him. And that's been a great lesson for me, that we reckon with God in every situation. I want to make it clear that for me it also was not a problem having a disabled child. That was for me always something that if the Lord gives you something, you are special to him, that he can literally entrust you with something like that, and one can only be enriched by that. And then when he was 4 months old, the next slide, you can see his eye. His eye suddenly started moving more to the inside and didn't move around. So off we were to the doctor again, and they got a big fright. What is the problem? Is there something on the brain? And he sent us to a specialist. And the specialist sat there, and I can remember him sitting there and looking through the pages of the book and saying he just can't understand what it is. And we went back home, and all we did was pray and bring it to the Lord. And if you look on the next slide, he was fine. And he was a very big boy. And that is his cousin that was born 9 days later. So they were big friends. and they got along very well. You can go to the next slide. It's just a few pictures of them, because this takes me to the next part of the story, where the Lord showed us that His ways are above our ways. We don't understand them, but His ways are perfect. And it was when Maddie and Josh were about 3.5 years old. The one morning, it was a Monday morning, and I was rushing off to work, and it's really, if you knew how far it is, you wouldn't think, well, that can't be such a rush. And I said to my husband, can't you quickly drive me, that I get to the office that minute or two earlier? And we had an old bakkie standing in front of the house, and it had a problem with the starter. And as he tried to start it, you had to pump it in the front, and he opened the bonnet, pumped it, and then when he put on the ignition, the car jumped and lurched forward. And we hadn't noticed, I was in the car, that Josh's little cousin had gone and stood in front of the car, between the wall and the car. And the car lurched forward into Maddie. Obviously, it was a huge shock for us, and we rushed him off to hospital. And I could never understand that. In the time when, as we were going to climb into the car, my brother-in-law walked along and he said, come, I've got a car, you climb in. And I said to him, no man, my husband will take me. You think how stupid a woman can be? And later on I just thought, what was I doing? Why did I ask him to drive me? Why did I not take up the offer? There was another offer. And we got to the hospital. The Lord was good that Dirk and I could stay with him day and night in the ICU. And they said if he makes the first op, if he makes the first 72 hours, he should be able to survive. So I'll never forget the Thursday. We had a huge celebration. We said, Lord, thank you, you've pulled him through. But it was on that day as well that they suddenly realized that his brain was starting to swell and that it didn't look good anymore. And in that week, when I was there, I said, Lord, I can't survive. How will I ever live with something like this? And that's when the Lord gave me that verse that I read in the beginning. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. And it was as if the Lord said to me, Ruth, before Maddie was born, his days were ordained. I had numbered each and every one of them, but I needed to use somebody. And sadly passed away the next Monday. And I'll never forget, there was an old man in the ICU that kept on calling my brother-in-law, and he'd say to him, listen, your life is wrecked. It'll never be the same again. And Nico would say, never. God, we have God. We believe in God. Our relationship will be better than ever. And it has been. There's never been anything that's come between us. We have a lovely working relationship. We can work together practically every day and in the spiritual work. And we realize how God used that to take us deeper and to get to know Him better through this whole situation. And then you think, Lord, there were so many miracles that you did for Josh. The cancers, we'd go for the tests. Nothing of that ever materialized. And the Lord was so good. They said his tongue is too big. He'll need to have speech therapy. And he had a bit, but there really wasn't any big problem. And as you'll see on the next photo, we've been blessed with a very happy child. He has got a lot of energy, a very strong will, keeps us on our knees, and yet we just realize how we could have been robbed of such a special blessing that the Lord wanted to give to us. And I want to mention once when he was 5 years old, he was in his room and he called me. He had fallen asleep already, and when I got to the room, he said, Mama, something feels like jelly in my heart. And I looked at him and I said, Josh, what is that? And he says, you know what? It feels like the Lord Jesus is knocking on my door and he wants to come in. And I'll never forget, I could take him and we went to my dad and we said, he wants to accept the Lord Jesus in his heart. Jeez. And for me, that is the most important, that I say, Lord, through everything, may his love be of eternal value, not only for him, but for many, many different souls. And as you'll see in the next photos, those aren't the most important things, but just to show how God works. He's first every year in his class, he does sport, he plays in the brass band, he enjoys his acting. There's so many different things that the Lord has blessed him with. I think he's the most gifted of our children. And if you think in the eye of the world, he shouldn't have survived. He shouldn't have lived. He shouldn't have been around. So I believe God has a special purpose for each person, and it is our prayer that that purpose is attained. As you can see there, catching fish, he enjoys life to the fullest. And on the next slide, you'll see a picture of the family. So Josh is the second on the left there. We have 5 children, and I can just thank the Lord that we honored the life that he gave, and that he will continue to work, and that he started and that he wanted to attain will be attained. Because the devil never sits down, he never just watches us and is satisfied with us wanting to glorify the Lord's name. He'll want to break it at all costs, and that we'll stay true to him, and that even in Josh's life, his name will be glorified.
This is the father.
Thank you for the opportunity. Just in closing, I haven't told my wife yet, but I think our next boy should be called Brad. Because you're the second Brad from America who really impresses me, but actually far more than that. The first one was Brad Huddleston. He came to speak to us on digital cocaine. I don't know if you've ever met him, but it seems like there's something good in bread. Thank you very much. Yes. Yeah, just to highlight one point for me, if you look at Josh's life and you look at Maddie's life, human beings, the world would have given Maddie 100%, and they gave Josh pretty much 0%. But as we heard, God has a plan for each one of us. He has a perfect plan. If we had interfered in God's plan, we would have robbed this life from his family, from himself, and as we heard, it's God's fingerprint. We would have robbed God. And the contrast in Maddie, the Lord is just showing us that life belongs to him. He doesn't work on our terms and with our little brain. His ways are far, far higher. And that's, I think, the big sin in abortion. We are making ourselves God, and we are interfering in God's perfect plan for his universe, for his world, and for his people. And we need to leave that alone. That life belongs to God. Doesn't matter in what form it comes, it doesn't matter in what form he allowed it to start or to be conceived. Life is a gift from him, and it is not to be interfered with. Thank you very much once again for the opportunity that we had to share this. May the Lord bless each one of you and strengthen you. We are not in the forefront in this battle. I've been very blessed being here today, but for each one of you who is involved in fighting in this battle, may the Lord strengthen you, grant you wisdom and authority and everything that you need. To his glory. Thank you.
No, he's not here. No, he's not here.
Unfortunately, he's attending some table tennis competition somewhere in Durban with all his cousins.
Never desert God, friends. Never turn your back on God. No matter how difficult the situation may be, or how prosperous you may be. Anyway, just in closing, when Josh was about 6-7 years old, him and one of his cousins were speaking about a certain test. And the cousin said, I got 90% in the test. And Josh said, oh, that's nothing. I got 120%.